we've spoken about how well Brandon Ingram is playing this season, and we've spoken about how it's going a little bit under the radar. Well, now it's starting to not go under the radar. Now people are starting to recognize how well Brandon Ingram has been playing for the Raptors, and now we're getting American media trying to find new ways to disrespect the Raptors trading for him at the trade deadline in 2025. So let's investigate the recent performances and where the criticism is stemming from, and why I believe the criticism is completely invalid. So we'll go back to the trade. It was February 5th, 2025. I remember it well. I think it was live streaming for a Raptors game. I was hanging out after the stream because it was trade deadline tomorrow. And I was like, all right, I'm going to sign off. If we're about to make the Brandon Ingram trade, I'm going to come back on. And an hour later, I came back on because the Raptors were about to make the Brandon Ingram trade, in which they did. And the trade ended up being something that I was completely on board with. The Raptors gave away expiring salary in the form of Bruce Brown and Kelly Olynyk, alongside a 2026 first-round pick via the Indiana Pacers and a second-round pick. First-round pick via the Indiana Pacers, which they acquired. They acquired in the Pascal Siakam trade from the previous year. So the Raptors were keeping control of their own draft capital, and they were trading away a first-round pick of an Indiana Pacers team who were surging up the Eastern Conference. We didn't know at the time that they would end up going to the NBA Finals and were one game of winning the NBA championship. But it was a surging Indiana Pacers team that, after a not great start to the season, were starting to surge up the Eastern Conference. So, in my opinion, at the time, that wasn't a very good first-round pick. I mean, we probably would have thought that pick would end up in the conservatively 15 to 20 range, but then kind of maybe thinking, okay, maybe that's more of like a 17 to 23 range, that first-round pick. We were okay parting with a not great first-round pick and salary filler for guys we didn't even really want for Brandon Ingram, all right? Then we re-signed Brandon Ingram for less than the max, which I thought was fine. I thought was great. Other people didn't think that. There's been criticism of how much the Raptors signed Brandon Ingram for, but $40 million a year, I was completely comfortable with. And the fact that Brandon Ingram has been so terrific out the gates this season has reaffirmed it. Like, I think it would have been even fair to give Brandon Ingram a little bit of leeway because he'd been out so long with that ankle sprain. But he came into the season, absolutely hit the ground running, averaging 21 points per game right now. He's shooting, lost here, 48.6% from the field. 3% is down, and that needs to come back up. He hasn't shot the ball very well from three. But even still, this season, his true shooting percentage, when I find it, is 58, which is good. So Brandon is playing really well. He's making clutch moments. He's the kind of the cold streak stopper. When the Raptors need a tough bucket, he's able to get it. He's been operating extremely well in mid-range. Like, let's take a look at B-Ball Index posting their mid-range shooting landscape. And sure, mid-range jumpers aren't super efficient shot in the modern NBA. I'm a big proponent to take less mid-range jumpers, unless you have a player who is so good at taking mid-range jumpers like Brandon Ingram, whose mid-range talent, according to the B-Ball Index scatter plot, is the highest in the NBA. And he's taking, looks like, over 9 mid-range attempts per game. So he's taking a high volume of mid-range jumpers, and he's doing so extraordinarily efficiently. Brandon Ingram's game is working. He is absolutely cooking this season. And like I said, there's been huge moments, like the game against the Charlotte Hornets, where he had that huge dunk on top of Ryan Kalkbrenner. And there's the huge block on Ryan Kalkbrenner to save the game for the Raptors from probably going to overtime. And he also, on the play before on offense, attracted the double, made the great pass of it to RJ Barrett for the Raptors to take the lead and eventually win the game. Brandon Ingram has been great for the Raptors. Like I said, more and more people are starting to notice it after the 27-point performance against the Hornets and those big plays in the fourth quarter. I know he had 5 turnovers, 4 of it in the first quarter. He was sloppy in the first, but he recovered and had a really good game. It was important to the Raptors winning. But like I said, people are starting to give him his props. Like this tweet here, I thought was interesting. We have World of Curry said, Bleach Report called us the loser of this trade and gave us a C+. For a trade where the Raptors gave up next to nothing, essentially. They gave up a not-so-great first-round pick and salary filler, and got Brandon Ingram, an all-star caliber forward, in his prime, okay? A C+, didn't feel like the right grade to me. But now it's starting to look like a good trade. So people are trying to find other reasons to disrespect this trade. We have Sam Quinn of CBS Sports, who said the pick Toronto gave up in the Brandon Ingram trade was Indiana's 2026 pick, top 4 protected. The Pacers are 1-13. Brandon Ingram has played well this year. I'd emphatically rather have that pick than Ingram on a 3 times 120 contract. I emphatically disagree. And also, this is so cope. This is such a cope answer because looking at it this way, yes, the Pacers are 1-13. That's looking like a much better pick. But also, when we made the trade, this was a team that was going on to make the freaking NBA Finals and take one of the greatest rosters ever assembled, who might break the NBA win record this year. They took that game all the way to Game 7. So I don't know how we can possibly be so revisionist on this and say, well, the Pacers are 1-13. It'd be really great to have that pick. And sure, maybe that would be the case. I'm not even sure. I mean, granted, I'm not even sure I'd go back and take that trade away, knowing what would have happened here. But it's really important to consider as we move through the rest of this season. It's very important for you to consider that the way in which the Indiana Pacers are going to treat this season changes dramatically because they own their own pick. They made that pick like right before the end of the NBA Finals, right before Tyrese Halliburton tore his Achilles. They made a trade with the Pelicans to get their own pick back for this season. They want to control their own draft capital, as you should. You want control of your own draft capital. Because they have control of their own draft capital, it has opened up the safety net where they can decide to tank. If it's not going well, they're decimated by injuries, they lost Miles Turner and didn't replace him, that's their own fault. Injuries are not the fault. The Turner thing is their own fault. They now know they have the safety net where if they are doing very poorly this season, they can tank. They can decide at February to sell off some players or rest players, keep guys out with injuries, and tank because they have that safety in their first round pick. If you were to simulate this season with the Pacers having their own pick and not having their own pick, their win amount changes, I think, dramatically because they know they have the pick to fall back on. If they didn't have their pick, they'd be winning a lot more games this season because they would have nothing to tank for. They would have nothing to sit back for. They would just be not quite full steam ahead, but they'd still be playing their top guys a lot more often. So as we go through the season, as you see bullshit like this from Sam Quinn, who's just trying to cope with the fact that the newfound information we have in Brandon Ingram doesn't support his preconceived notion about the trade. Whenever you see stuff like this, it's important to remember that the Indiana Pacers are going to treat this season extremely differently because they own their pick. We cannot evaluate trades by looking through the lens of hindsight, like in situations like this. You have to look at the trade in the vacuum of what it was when it happened. What it was when it happened was the Indiana Pacers were starting to surge up the Eastern Conference. Absolutely looked like a playoff team. At best, it looked like you're getting a pick outside the lottery. What it's turned into shouldn't be the factor that helps you evaluate this trade to be positive or negative. It's happened. The Indiana Pacers got unlucky with injuries. They lost Miles Turner to free agency. And now they're able to tank. That does not take away from what Brandon Ingram is doing for this team. And Brandon Ingram playing like an all-star pretty much for the Raptors is something I'm very happy that they traded for. Long may it continue through the season.